just before lunch, you tested your English skills with a Scottish accent. And now after lunch, we just continue with the English for most of this seminar. We will have a presentation on PISA, which will be in Swedish, and then we will have Lucy presenting ideas from her book in English, and then we will have a short conversation in English as well. So my name is Bodil Bovner. I work at Sveriges kommuner och landsting, and is very happy that this seminar is taking place. I listened to Lucy Crayan last year in Gothenburg and thought it was so interesting, so I wanted to get her here to get you all to hear what she has been experienced. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm also very happy that Mats could also be here, because he has been working with PISA and international comparisons in different ways for many years, and can give you first an insight of the last PISA, but also he has a lot of experience and knowledge about what can be compared and what cannot. But perhaps that will be something that will be discussed after the presentation. Mats Björnsson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi everybody. Jag tänkte jag skulle prata svenska. Jag har varit artig att informera Lucy om vad jag ska säga. Det blir på betoning här kort och översikt och betoning på resultat som framgår på 10 minuter. I de här kunskapsmätningarna så faller resultaten ut, som ni säkert har sett, i 5 eller 6 nivåer. Där 5 eller 6 är den högsta. Jag utgår från att den här församlingen har åtminstone en 3, för då kan man läsa diagram och så ganska bra. Så jag tänkte att det skulle gå ganska fort. Jag kan väl inleda med att säga att när Torsten Hussein var med och skapade en internationell utvärderingsorganisation för skolan, IEA, slutet på 50-talet, så var det väldigt mycket av forskning och forskarnas laboratorium i fokus. När PISA och OECD kom in på scenen då, slutet på 1900-talet, och med den första PISA-mätningen 2000, så blev det, ska vi säga, mer politik än forskning kanske. Vilket inte avser att vara allt för kontroversiell, men det är ju så att OECD pratar med regeringarna i olika länder, medlemsländerna. Och det blir mycket politik. Ja, efter den lilla inledningen så tänkte jag visa en bild där man kan då ta alla de kunskapsmätningar som svenska elever har varit med i ungefär 20 år bakåt i tiden och lägga dem olika högar. Den högsta högen här, det är de mätningarna där svenska elever har visat signifikant över genomsnitt, och ni ser att den dominerar väldigt mycket. Av de här 47 mätningarna så är väl ungefär 30 som ligger över genomsnitt. Det ser ju ganska bra ut. Om man vänder på steken och tittar på vilka av de här mätningarna som går att jämföra med en föregående på ett statistiskt bra sätt, så ser ni att det är ganska många som visar på negativ förändring. Och det är alltså det vi kan se om vi uttrycker på det här sättet. Det var en kraftig och successiv nedgång av resultaten i matematik, läsning och naturvetenskap, åtminstone mellan 2000 och 2012. Även från 95 kan man säga så var det vissa resultat. Och det här visar sig både i PISA och TIMSS. TIMSS och PIRLS är såna IEA-mätningar som inte OECD står för. PISA är OECDs. Och det här är välkänt. Och det skedde en tydlig förbättring. Jag ska visa lite mer om det sen. Nu den senaste mätningarna som både var PISA och TIMSS, de råkade sammanfalla 2015. En TIMSS-mätning som görs var 4:e år och PISA som görs var 3:e år. I läsning såg man framförallt en förbättring i de nedersta skikten, vilket var glädjande. kan jag nämna redan nu att det var framförallt pojkar som förbättrade sina resultat. Hörs det vad jag säger här längst bak? Tack. Ingen tid av för frågor heller, det är tur det. Vi skulle kunna hålla på väldigt länge med det här. Men nu ska jag visa PISA-resultaten från 2000 fram till den senaste för de nordiska länderna. Och om vi börjar med den svenska linjen, den röda, så ser ni att den föll en del från en ganska god nivå och brantare och brantare ner till 2012 och sen en viss upphämtning. Det här är poängen, den genomsnittspoäng som eleverna får i de här mätningarna. Tittar vi på Finland, den blåa linjen, så ser ni att de är en klass för sig, men en ganska kraftig nedgång efter 2006 får man säga. Vilket förstås debatteras i Finland livligt just nu. Danmark, vad ska man säga, det har inte hänt särskilt mycket under de här åren med de danska genomsnittsresultaten. Island, den ljusblå linjen, man kan väl säga att de kämpar. Det mest irriterande med den här bilden är väl då Norge som har liksom kommit förbi på upploppet här senaste tiden. Det fanns en norsk utbildningsminister som heter Clement för ett antal år sedan. När Norge gjorde väldigt dåliga resultat så uttryckte denna politiker att det var som om Norge kom hem från ett skid-VM utan en enda medalj. Jag tycker det säger ganska mycket om karaktären på de här tävlingarna. Om man nu skulle se det så. Ja, vi fortsätter. Centrala iakttagelser. Det förtjänar att nämnas eftersom det nästan aldrig nämns att medborgarkunskaper, vi kallar det så, de mäts också i något som heter CIVED och numera X. De är fortsatt på en god nivå. Engelska har mätts i Europa, ett antal europeiska länder. Det var toppresultat. Och i samma mätning så visade kunskaperna i spanska ett bottenresultat. Och som ni säkert känner till, likvärdigheten är försämrad under den här perioden från 2000. Rätt så kraftigt. Skolverket redovisar i sin senaste PISA-rapport 7 tror jag indikatorer på likvärdighet och 5 av dem har backat. Och det är väldigt tydligt att totalvariationen har blivit större och att skolvariationen eller mellanskolvariationen har ökat kraftigt. Den här trenden visar sig både i PISA och TIMSS. Jag gör noteringen om man går tillbaks ganska många år att i stort sett genomgående är resultaten bättre i de tidigare årskurserna än i de senare. Då menar jag inte jämfört mellan de tidigare och senare utan i internationell jämförelse klarar sig yngre elever i Sverige bättre än de äldre eleverna gör i internationell jämförelse. Nu går jag in på PISA enbart. Flickornas resultat är, alltså om man ser det i stort så i matematik och naturvetenskap överträffar pojkarna i OECD flickorna i regel. Så är det inte i våra nordiska länder, exklusive Danmark. I läsning är skillnaden ganska stor i många länder, inte minst i våra länder, Finland, Norge, Island och Sverige. Om man tittar på, det här är inte flickors och pojkars resultat utan det är könsskillnaden. De blåa visar skillnaden i poäng mellan könen i Sverige. Och de orangea visar poängskillnaden i OECD som helhet. Ni ser att de svenska könsskillnaderna är större med en topp på 51 poäng förra mätningen, vilket är väldigt mycket. Och sen har könsskillnaden minskat i både OECD och Sverige. När det gäller elever med olika bakgrund, utländsk-svensk, så är skillnaderna också stora. Det här är också en bild på skillnader. Jag har uttryckt det lite enkelt. Med andra generationens invandrare menar jag de som är födda i Sverige med utlandsfödda föräldrar. Och med första generationen menar jag de som är födda utomlands med utlandsfödda föräldrar. Och ni ser att poänggapet i alla de här 3 PISA-domänerna, ämnena, är ganska stor. Runt 40-50 poäng respektive 80-90 poäng. De har varit ganska stora tidigare också, men de har inte tenderat att minska. Det kan vi säga. Det har gjorts proven som har varit under de här många åren har varit på papper och penna. Men under några år tidigare gjorde man försök och hade både papper och penna för att testa om man kunde ha alltså både papper och penna och digitalt. Nu PISA, den här sista omgången, gjordes enbart på dator. Och det har visats tidigare att det gynnar svenska elever jämfört med andra länder och speciellt pojkar. Det kan vara värt att påminna sig. Det kan ju bero på att svenska elever är mer vana vid digitala medier. Det är i alla fall en god gissning. Vi kan också konstatera att provmotivationen var klart högre i den senaste mätningen. Man ställer olika frågor till eleverna. Det är inte bara de här kunskapsproven utan det är omfattande enkäter om allt från trivsel till hur man uppfattar lektioner och så vidare. Men man ställer också frågor om hur motiverad man kände sig att göra det här provet. Så det kan ju också ha bidragit till en förbättring. Vilket säger någonting om också hur känsligt det är med de här mätningarna. Motivationen är att göra de här proven är viktig och särskilt prov som inte har någon betydelse för elevernas betyg och så. Slutligen konstaterar man att skolket bland svenska elever är mindre än i OECD. Ankomsterna, de sena, är flera. Och när det gäller klassrumsklimat som man har ett antal frågor om så är de ungefär på genomsnitt. Som sagt, jag skulle kunna hålla på en timme till men så blir det inte. Är det någon som vill skicka en fråga till mig så kan ni göra det på den här adressen. Tack så mycket.
Tack Mats. Och du kommer tillbaka efter Lucy så kan vi ha en liten diskussion och möjligheten till någon fråga från publiken. I was thinking, Mats was mentioning in the end that if the pupils were differently motivated in different times doing the test, that was you could see quite a difference. And I've also seen tests where you can see quite a difference if you check in different settings, whether it's a very hot or a very cold day and things like that. So it's interesting to think about all the different things that make up what the tests do, and then what is the result of the actual teaching. And Lucy, you have been traveling the world to really get a grip of what's behind all this when you just talk about tests and you talk about systems. And the floor is yours.
Thank you
Tell
very
us all about
much.
it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you, first of all, so much for listening to me in English. I'm afraid my Swedish is rather rusty. And I just want to start by saying, if you were at a conference, equivalent conference in England, and you had a speaker giving a talk in French, which is what we learn at school, the room would be maybe 2 rows full. So I think this in itself speaks volumes about the Swedish education system. That's remarkable. Well done. I've never spoken to anyone that is so high up. I feel like a gladiator in an auditorium, like waiting for you to do this. So, I'm going to speak to you today about learning from top performing education systems as defined by PISA. So what did I do? Why am I here talking about this? So I'm a teacher originally. I taught science in a secondary school in London. And in about year 3, I became quite frustrated, quite disillusioned about some aspects of the English education system. And I heard about these other countries that were doing much better than us in reading, maths and science. And I wanted to understand what they were doing. So I was in a position where I had a bit of money saved up. I just finished doing a master's, hadn't yet got a new job, and I thought, why not go and have a look for myself? So I wrote some emails to teachers in various countries. I said, hi, my name is Lucy. I'm a teacher from England. Can I come and help out in your school? I'd like to learn from you. And they said, yes. Amazing. And I also said, can I please stay with you as well? And they said, yes. So, teachers are wonderful. So I approached schools under the radar. I didn't want to go through an official route, because I think if you take the official route, you only see schools which are very good and everyone wants to show you. I wanted to have a better understanding of a normal school. I lived with teachers. I taught with them where possible. So I taught a lot in Finland and in China, and I helped out in classrooms in the other places I visited. I spent 3 to 4 weeks in each country, 2 to 3 weeks of those actually inside schools, in classrooms, interviewing teachers, students, parents, and policymakers, sometimes formally, sometimes just a chat in the car on the way to work. And then I returned home and I read a lot of studies from academics who've done research on different countries, other accounts of people who'd gone to have a look, and tried to bring all of my ideas together. And I wrote a book, which was sitting over there, actually. I think Bodil has a copy. So I'm going to speak to you, thank you, about some of the ideas that came out of this, that I've written about in my book. So what I've done is, at the end, is identified some features of high-performing and equitable education systems. So equitable in the OECD sense means simply the extent to which students' results are dependent on the parental background. So is it the case that poor students are doing badly and rich students are doing well, or is there less relationship between those two things? Caveat. Each of these things could be several PhD theses. I'm going to speak about all of them in less than 20 minutes. So that means that it will be very high level. For the nuance, please come and talk to me afterwards, or have a read of my book. So to start with, designing the learning approach for mastery. So what do I mean by that? I want to tell you about a girl who I met called Sophie. Sophie's Chinese. She has a Chinese name, but she wanted to be known by her English name. And she spent most of her schooling in China, and then she went to Canada at age 15. And I asked her, what are the main differences between your education in China and your education in Canada? Bearing in mind both countries do quite well in PISA, but Shanghai, China was until recently at the very top. And she said, the most significant difference I find is the depth of the material covered. In Canada, they do a little bit of everything, and they do it really fast before you really get the essence of that part, and then they jump into something else. Whereas in China, they go on about some knowledge for quite a long time, maybe several weeks, before they move to the next topic. So you get a lot of practice, and you really know it. So that's a feature of the curriculum in Shanghai, China. It's also a feature of the curriculum in Japan and Singapore, all of which do very well. So I'm going to share three things which make a good national curricula. This comes from a paper by researchers called Schmidt and Proat, who've looked at curricula of top-performing education systems. So they are minimal. So as Sophie says, they focus on fewer topics, but in greater depth. And that means that all students have a chance to understand that topic before they move on. They're high level, so the curriculum is clear on what concepts children need to understand, but don't tell teachers, and you must teach it in this way and this way and this way. And it's ordered. So for some subjects, particularly for maths and for science, as I'm sure we have some maths and science teachers or ex-teachers in the audience, you will know it's really important the order in which you teach things. That you must understand something before you then can understand something else. Slightly contentious one coming up. Pedagogy. I'm going to do one slide. I'm just going to show you one graph, which I think is very interesting, and relates to this idea of mastery approach. So, no, it's not actually small on the screen, it's very big. So what you have here, this is a graph from a study from the OECD that was released in 2016, so last year. And they've mapped out the countries that take part in PISA. On this side, you have more traditional, so teacher-directed instruction. And on this side, you have less traditional, student-oriented instruction. Now, it's contentious because not everyone will agree exactly what that means. But this was based on students reporting what happened in their lessons. And what I've done here is I've just highlighted top-performing systems. And you can see the average is here. So I thought it was quite interesting that most of the top performers, with the exception of Switzerland, are on this side of the graph. So more teacher-directed instruction compared to these countries, which, in fact, all of them say they have more teacher-directed instruction, but these ones, the ratio is different. There's more student-centered compared to teacher-directed. And that corresponds with what I saw. So the surprises for me were that not everywhere lived up to stereotypes. So I thought before I left that I'd go to Finland and then they would all be on the floor in groups, students doing their own projects, and the teacher would be going around helping. And I didn't see that. I did see students on the floor, but I did also see lots of teacher directed from the front, explaining first of all, and then having a class discussion with different students giving answers and commenting on each other's. In Singapore, I expected to see rows of students in lines and the teacher standing at the front and writing on the board. And they were doing whole class teaching, but there was so much student interaction. They say, right, you tell me, what do you think? Oh, that's interesting. Now, what do you think of what she said? And why? And let's put that on the board. And then I want you people over here to come and put a different way of doing things. So actually, they were more similar than previously I thought. It was whole class teaching, but very interactive. Moving on. Support children to take on challenges and meet universal goals. So this is something that I think Sweden, you're already doing, or a lot of this already. So certainly this first point, so the majority of the systems I visited and the majority of the systems in the top 12, they don't put children into different schools using tests until they are 15 or 16. So some countries do that at a young age, at 10 or 11. These countries are doing it later. Within schools, students are all in mixed ability classrooms. So again, they're not dividing children into different classes until they're 15 or 16. Singapore being the exception of the countries that I visited. Something which I think might be of more interest to you, because I know you do this already, is this third point. So even within lessons, there doesn't seem to be that much differentiation by activity. Okay, so what that means, the percentages I have up here are teachers reporting how often they give children different work depending on their abilities, so different activities. Do they do that a lot or not? In England, teachers do that a lot. In England, we are encouraged to give one worksheet to the higher ability students, one worksheet to the lower ability students. But interestingly, I certainly didn't see that much of it in East Asia or in Finland, and you can see the percentages there. And that which leads me to, how are they differentiating then? Because not all children are the same, is through support. So rather than giving them different work, everyone has to get here, but these children are going to have extra help rather than a different expectation. So high expectations for all with different levels of support. Which brings me to, what do Bart Simpson and Chinese teachers have in common? It's a hard question. I'm going to tell you. So but there were two different Chinese teachers I spoke to in Shanghai who had been on trips to visit either England or America. And I asked them what they thought. And they were very positive. And then I said, anything that you think wasn't so positive or you think maybe they should do differently? And they looked really awkward. And then they said a similar thing. They said, so the thing which I don't understand is that some children, they were given easier work. How are they going to catch up if you give them easier work? They were confused. Bart Simpson, makes a similar point. When he's put in a remedial class, he says, I can't do a Bart accent. I've tried. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it in English accent. Let me get this straight. We're behind the rest of our class, and we're going to catch up to them by going slower than they are. Cuckoo. So that's Bart's point 2. So, fine. That sounds great, doesn't it? High expectations for everyone, but how do you actually make that work? It's hard. I've tried teaching mixed ability classes. So one thing which these systems do is invest in teachers. And what I mean by that is there is more teacher time. Now, for Finland and Canada, the way that works is that they will have an additional teacher or teachers in the school whose whole job is to support those students who are falling behind. And perhaps you have that in Sweden, I don't know. In England, we have teaching assistants. So they're less qualified who will be doing that job of supporting students in classrooms and out of classrooms. In East Asia, it's a different way. So it's not an extra teacher, it's the class teacher. But the class teacher has more time because the class teacher teaches fewer lessons. So in Shanghai, for example, teachers will teach 2 to 3 lessons a day only, which means they then have time to work with students one-on-one. When students have study sessions, they can support those students that are finding things difficult. They also do have private tuition, which I'm sure has an impact as well. How am I doing? Okay. Quality. So it's not just about how much teacher time you have, it's also about how good those teachers are. And there are 2 ways, again, divided between East and West, in which these systems are managing that. So in Finland, I'm sure you will know this already, primary school teachers have 5 years of training, which includes a practicum, so it's the theory and also the practice, before they become qualified teachers, before they teach in schools. In Shanghai, Singapore and Japan, they will have just a year, perhaps, postgraduate teaching, but then there are structured opportunities and requirements throughout their career to continue to develop and actually be assessed on how whether they have met certain standards. So this picture is of the teacher career structure in Singapore. So in Singapore, you start off as a classroom teacher, and then your pay might increase for 2 to 3 years, and then you have to demonstrate that actually now you're meeting the requirements of a senior teacher, that you are able to demonstrate that you can do excellent assessment or whatever it is. You can go down a specialist track or you can go down a leadership track. So if you want to be a school principal, for example, you have to do 6 months of training before you can take on that role. So it's structured. Finally, accountability, which, if I'm honest, is one of the things which made me leave schools in England in the first place. So combine school accountability with support, and I've added connections, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So this graph shows the use of achievement data for accountability purposes. So the blue bar, the way in which they're ranked, is the percentage of students in schools that publish achievement data. So essentially, how much do schools publish data publicly? And just have a look at the countries at the top there. So you've got United States, who do quite averagely in PISA. The Netherlands, that do quite well, often in top 10 to 12. United Kingdom, pretty average. Sweden and New Zealand have followed similar patterns in PISA in being used to be quite strong, but have reduced in the past 10 to 15 years. Well, now you can't infer anything definite from that, but it's suggesting to me that maybe publishing school data and trying to improve schools through parental choice and competition isn't having the effects that were promised from that. If you look at the opposite end of this graph, at the bottom, you have Finland. You have Shanghai, China, top performer, Japan, top performer, Switzerland, top performer, Macau, China, top performer. So clearly these countries are managing to hold schools accountable and bring about school improvement without using the new public management approach. For any people who've studied this in the room, apologies if you haven't. So, what are they doing then? So when I was researching for my book, I typed accountability into Word, and I right-clicked, and you can see the synonyms on Microsoft Word. And it said there were four different words under synonyms: liability, culpability, responsibility, and answerability. And I thought this is quite a useful way to think about two different approaches to accountability. So on the one hand, you have liability and culpability, so blame, it's your fault. On the other hand, you have responsibility and answerability. Okay, the results aren't good, let's talk about that. So just a few thoughts on those and comparing what I experience in my country, in England, and I believe is also the case in America, with the approach taken in all of the different top performing countries I went to. So one option is blame head teachers and school governors for poor results, or you can discuss with the head teacher or the principal the reasons for that and support them to take steps to address it. So this is the approach taken in Canada, for example. So in Canada, there are school superintendents who often are ex-school principals who've been successful themselves, and they will work with the head teacher, have the serious conversations, and prompt them to make a change in their schools. You could rely solely on school data to tell if a school leader is doing a good job, and I know in my country, often whether a school is considered to be a good school or not will depend on what percentage of students are achieving certain grades. Or you can use this middle tier, so superintendents, for example, municipality leads, to play a role where they actually go into schools and understand what's happening on the ground. You can send in a new team of people to take over a school. So that's one strategy in England, is fire the head teacher, bring in someone new. That's one approach. Or you can build the capacity of your existing staff. Now, one example, because I've stopped talking about foreign systems, I'll come back, is in Shanghai, where they have a system where if a school is performing not so well, the state will pay for a senior leader and some expert teachers from a school which is doing well, but in a similar area, to come over to the failing school, work alongside the teachers, sometimes take over for a little bit to model, to demonstrate how to improve the school, and then gradually leave and go back. So they build the capacity, they teach them, and then they go. And that comes back to my final point. So one option is you can use sanctions, so you can fine schools for not doing well, reward them with incentives or praise is one option. Or you can offer support and resource to help overcome any issues. And one way in which the countries that I went to do that is by connecting school leaders with school leaders elsewhere who are doing well in whichever area they're struggling with. So 2 different models. No prizes for guessing which one I prefer. Good. So that I'm going to stop now. And I think I've put any questions, but we're going to have a discussion first, and then we'll have some time for questions later. But if you don't get a chance to ask a question, please do feel free to come and talk to me or tweet me. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Tack.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Lucy told me before that I was to wave to her when she spoke too quickly, but I don't think you did that. I hope all of you followed and also been seeing you also have in Swedish radio something in UR. So there is a link where you talk more about the book if you want. So please come and we will have some questions about, because now you have seen some about how Sweden has been performing, and or you have been visiting other countries than your own to see how they are performing. And one interesting thing is, how much can you really learn from other countries? How much is the context relevant for a context of a school, the culture in a school? How much is that reflected from the culture of a country? What you say, what have you seen from your visits? Do you see that the culture of a country is similar to the culture of the school?
Yes, hugely. But I don't think that means that we can't learn anything from them. I think you have to be very careful with how you learn from other countries. What you can't do, which some politicians do, is say, "Oh, that one's nice and shiny. I want that one. Yoink! Now let's do it in Sweden or in England." You have to look at what makes that policy work in context and different policies that relate to it, and then sometimes it can work. Can I say one more thing?
2.
1, 2, thanks.
2.
I also think that we can learn from the culture. So a lot of people will say, well, we can't learn anything from China because it's so different, because the students work really hard, they put in lots of effort, and the children in England, they're not like that. But I think that if anyone has the power to change a culture, if anyone has the power to get to students to see themselves as capable of higher achievement and see effort as being more important than innate talent, brains, it is teachers. So I think it's within schools' power to start shifting cultures to being one where it is more like China. We wouldn't want to go all the way. I wouldn't send my own children to school in Shanghai. But some of the way, I think, would be helpful.
And Mats, what do you think? You've been working with the policymakers for a very long time, and then hearing them talk about PISA and then studying PISA yourself. And what do you think? Can you take aspects from other countries, or can you go along the culture road, as Lucy suggests?
I can say, of course, you can learn. You can learn from other countries. You can learn from other schools, neighbor schools, neighbor municipality. You can learn from anything as long as you reflect on your own practice. It doesn't say that you can learn much from other countries, but you can really learn if some prerequisites are fulfilled. You must be curious. You must be aware that there are other ways to do. You must be committed to perhaps change your ways of working, etc. Otherwise, you can't learn anything. So, of course. But I think one of the things I really appreciate with your book is that you point to culture, to society. You even talk about nation building in some countries, which has something to do, for example, Finland or other countries, Singapore, which has something to do with the public's opinion about the school system and the importance of schooling, importance of striving, etc., etc. Apart from that, in some, I don't know if you mentioned it, but in many of these countries in East Asia, you have extra schools. In Japan, you have the Yuko system. More of half of the pupils go to afternoon or evening schools. Parents want them to go there, often several days, several hours every day. So, of course, that's something that if you want to understand the results of PISA, you must also understand different cultures of motivation, how parents, teachers look at the importance of striving, the importance of making effort to struggle, etc. That has a big... And OECD doesn't like very much the Yuko system because they think it's ineffective. Lots of resources. I mean, parents pay privately a lot of money for these afternoon or evening schools, and they say this money should be invested in the school system instead. So it's a lot to say about all this.
And you say also, if you want to understand PISA, in your own opinion, what would you say would be the best way to use PISA? I mean, it is a comparison that gives us knowledge about how we're doing and how other countries are doing, which we didn't have previously to PISA. But what would be the best use of once results are presented, and what would we do with it?
The best way to use it. I'm an analytic, so I find it very easy to use all the data. But that's the aim of this, is to understand how systems are working, not exactly what you could not import, but what you could learn. But I think what you do in your book, which you didn't talk so much about, is you end with 5 principles. I think you do it very well, because it's so easy to fall down to rather simplified conclusions. And that's a risk of PISA and EIA measurements. You fall down to simplifying conclusions. And if you're a politician, you are looking for simplified, because that's the nature of politics. But your 5 principles, I think they could be discussed, they could be questioned, but I think you really land good after your Odyssey.
Thank you.
Perhaps you should mention them. You have mentioned some of them, but not really.
Yeah.
And I find Sweden falls rather good in relation to them, but not when it comes to how you handle teachers' education, teachers' instruction, teachers' development. We have a lot to learn, and I think the School Commission have some ideas about this too. Yes, would you mention something about it?
Shall I just read them out?
Yeah, sure.
That's
Let's see the way to do
I
it.
could. And
you
then
get a
then you
teaser
get the
from the
exact
book if you have
wording
it.
rather than from my head. So, principle 1. Get children ready for formal learning. So I didn't talk about that because I think you do that already. Well done. So essentially the idea that rather than starting academic teaching at age 4 or age 5, it's important for children to develop other skills, so social skills, knowledge of their environment, how to pay attention. There are some key things children need to do before they begin learning to add up, for example. Having a sense of number before you start learning to actually add. Design curricular concepts for mastery, I've spoken about today. Support children to take on challenges rather than making concessions. So I spoke a little around that as well. And again, that's something which I think that Sweden already does well. So I didn't go into that too much. Treat teachers as professionals. I think it's the one that you think perhaps Sweden might have the most to learn from other countries. So I suppose that there's a positive cycle you can get into, and then there's a negative cycle you can get into. So the positive cycle, if you have a handy head start like Finland, so you spoke of nation building. So if you already have teachers who are respected because they were seen as building Finnishness in schools rather than the Finns being Swedes or Russians, they were building Finnishness. They started off as being respected. Then you can be selective with who comes into the profession. If you are selective, then that already raises the status. If you then give them very good training, it raises the status further, which means you can be selective. So it's all happy cycle. The opposite is if it's not so high status, it's hard to get people to come in. You can't be selective. You have to let lots of people in. Then because the standard is low, you have to be quite top down and say, well, you have to do this and this and this. Then it's less attractive. And if you don't give them proper training, then no one wants to do it. I'm not saying this is Sweden. This is just the opposite of the good one. So for me, I think that if you haven't already got the head start, one good way of getting out of the negative loop is to teach a career structure that I demonstrated. So maybe not all teachers are at a high standard already because of a history of less qualified people coming into the profession, but you can establish right now, so we have teachers, now we have chartered teachers, for example, and existing teachers who are very good can demonstrate they are meeting this standard, and then gradually you can build that up. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all in here.
That could also be a teaser for the next seminar where we will talk about
good.
the career structure of teachers. So
Good.
And
And
the
then there's
fifth
one
one.
I can say
more.
we have to start some nation building in Sweden.
Well, no, I won't go. I will just comment. I wonder, considering what's going on across the world at the moment. So certainly in England, you'll have heard of Brexit. I'm really sorry, was nothing to do with me. In America, you have Trump. I think that there's a lot of churn. You know, the French elections recently. I'm hoping that might inspire more young people to go into teaching and educate children about the importance of having a global outlook and welcoming people. So that's my politics. But perhaps, you know, in terms of nation building, maybe that can start to happen.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
We talk a lot about school systems, which are the best systems, etc. And in your book, as I said, you talk a lot about things that are not really in the school system, but school system is surrounded by lots of culture, traditions, etc. So what teachers do in the classroom, is that an effect of the school system, or how much? You understand me?
Yes, I think it is a huge amount. So obviously you can have teachers who are fantastic even in a bad system. You have some teachers who are just brilliant. But I think largely, like how good you are as a teacher is partly to do with who you are as a person, and that is determined by the selection criteria. So if the selection criteria checks that you are that you like children, that you are able to stand in front of a classroom and talk to them. Now I'm demonstrating I can't do that. So there's those things, but then there's also obviously training and ideas, and I think the ideas have a huge impact on how good you are as a teacher, and you have some very fashionable ideas in different countries which are actually not useful at all. Many ideas, you know, in England that go around which are not based on research about learning at all, and actually sometimes can be harmful. So if you have a system in which there is more, it's more research based. So for example, in Singapore, they have a National Institute of Education, which lots of researchers are doing research into what is effective in teaching and sharing that across the country. Sometimes the ideas are not based on research, they're just coming out of someone's head, which might relate to your other question, actually.
Yeah. And let's see, maybe there is any one of you wants to ask questions?
We have a very special
We have a very
down
special,
here.
so this will be able to get a bit longer than because you may be able to throw it. And if you get it, you talk. So this is the microphone. So you can have it.
Thank you. I was quite interested to see that New Zealand and Sweden were on par. And when you were talking about learning from other countries, in year 2000, everybody in Sweden was rushing to New Zealand to learn from their system. Is that something that hasn't really helped us? Had it been better if we'd gone to Finland instead and not had such a nice long holiday?
Well,
Anyone?
I can say that was on the top of a new liberal era. People went to New Zealand. I think the deputy minister took with him the general director of Skolverket because they had a deregulation, and that was very much on focus at that time. Of course, we could have gone to Finland. It's not so exciting, but it would have been better. I don't think, I will say this once again, I'm not sure that you learn best from special countries that done well. You could study them, but you could learn from almost anywhere. Your neighbor school, your neighbor country. You could go to Poland, you could go to Germany, and it depends on your attitudes. It's hard to really take out the best of lots of systems. It's not that you can do that too, but it's not enough. That's my opinion.
It's more about, I guess you say it's more about the reflections, really, that
Yes.
the input to reflections can come from many things, and it can come from your fellow teachers.
And you see something
in
else
school.
than what you're doing yourself.
Yeah.
That's important.
So open your eyes to new things and reflect upon them should in that way be the basis for changes, really.
Can I just comment on that as well? I also think it's really important to remember when you're looking at another country which is doing well, if they're doing well in, let's say, in 2009, that has nothing to do with the policies in 2009. That has everything to do with the policies in the 1990s and the early 2000s, because actually those children started primary school 10 years ago. So I think one mistake people make is they say, oh, Finland's doing well, let's go and look at what Finland are doing now. And I know obviously I can't time travel, so I also went there now, not 10 years ago. But it's important to ask questions around what's changed. What's changed in the past 10 years? Did you always do this? Have a look at papers around the history of education reform, and not only look at what they're doing at the time. Because New Zealand is a good example where they've made some reforms and their results have gone down. And if you were looking at those reforms when they were first made, you can't see their effects.
So we have a question here. So I travel a bit to try to...
Hello, thank you very much. I have a really good experience, and I can compare universities in Armenia, USA, and Sweden. So I had a really good opportunity to study in all the three countries. And one really funny experience I can say that in Armenia, chess is really obligatory. So it's really must learn in schools, and if you compare math Olympic results and you can see that Armenia always has really good results in math. Is this something maybe we all can little think about? Because if you learn playing chess, and children, especially when they learn playing chess when they are children, it gives them really big opportunity to think. So what you both think about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I start?
Yeah.
I think there are lots of special initiatives you can have, and you can see it's also imported in a way, lots of special initiatives in different schools. And that happens all the time. We talk more here about rather broad learnings from, and your conclusions are rather broad, and inside that you have to form your own analysis nationally. That's what I think.
I think it's a really interesting question, because I think it exemplifies an idea which I think actually has led some systems astray. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I think that I'm not saying that chess isn't great. Chess is great, and I think it's a wonderful thing for children to be learning. Now I don't, just to clarify, I don't know much about the research on the secondary effects that learning chess has. But I do know about research that suggests that if you learn a skill in one particular area, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will then be able to transfer that to other areas. So problem solving in chess is not going to make you a better problem solver in mathematics. Actually, you need to learn chess, and then you become an expert problem solver in chess, and you need to learn maths and become an expert problem solver in maths. And there is this idea that actually we don't need children to learn knowledge, because they can just Google it. They just need to learn skills. And that, I think, is incorrect, because you can't become good at skills, the skill of problem solving or being creative, unless you have something to solve problems about. So I think I've just not answered your question, I've just gone and made a totally different point. But I think from that perspective, I think that, yes, chess is fantastic for its own sake. I don't think that necessarily it would lead to expertise in mathematics, but you can prove me wrong with a paper.
I don't know what it says about if you look to Sweden and performing chess. We would rather think, I guess, at the musical, which says perhaps something about what Sweden school is good about as well. And this last thing you talked about, it was it's also if you need to learn the different skills. And that makes it perhaps even more difficult thinking about what skills you might need in the future. Because as you said, you're quite a long time in education. And obviously that is one of the areas where the policy makers should be involved, because you can't really guess and you can't really get from research how the future will be. But then we have, in Sweden, we have quite a lot of policy discussions also on pedagogical issues, which are the ones that you actually could do research on and see. Is that something familiar from countries you've seen, or your own country?
You mean the politicians talking about it?
Yeah.
Or
no, they're talking about pedagogical
talking about pedagogy. Yeah, yes. Unfortunately. I personally think that, like I said before, I think it should be a teaching institute. You should have a professional body of teachers or researchers that are sharing with the nation's teachers what works in pedagogy. I think that politicians can have an idea in their minds that this is what we need, and it's not always, or even often, based on what research shows will actually be helpful. But then with things like what the future will hold, what skills will children need in the future, their guess is as good as anyone's. None of us know what that will be. So what would be your favorite from all of the politicians you work with? What would be the things that they should focus about in the policy making, and what should they leave to the schools?
Oh, yeah. I have my favorites on the negative side. But one thing I want to say about this is that there is a very stubborn idea in the Swedish debate since many, many years, and that is that there is one best way of teaching, and this is this or this. And this goes a little along the axis about traditional, or the teacher on the top, or democratic lessons, etc., etc. You can say broadly that you have to be engaged as a teacher. You have to have a clear idea of what you want with your lesson. You have to follow your pupils. You have to use a variety of methods, etc., etc. I think broadly you can be unified around some principles. But when it comes to how do you do your lessons, there is no one best way. And that's a very, I said, stubborn idea in the Swedish debate. Perhaps more stubborn in this country than in many others. I haven't seen this. And also about grading system, etc. I must say, it's tiring sometimes.
Yeah, and not to be too tiring to the audience, I would like to end this with saying that like we already said, that you can learn from very many things to improve your own system, to improve your own skills as a teacher, or to improve your own policy making. And the important part is reflect upon what you do, but also get new input. And I'm sure that you could get a lot of new input from the book. You talked a little about it here, but I hope that many of you will find it interesting and read it. To see that it is possible to learn from other people's ideas, but you just have to get them to be your own and to have them in your own context. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for coming.
Tack.